is karate dying, and what can we do to save it? Now, if you love karate, that's probably the two most important and pertinent questions you can ask. So in order to answer the first question, is karate dying? Let me explain about the past 40 or so years of martial arts and karate history. So back in the 70s and particularly in the 80s, karate was the go-to martial art. We were the most popular martial art on the planet. And if you were an adult or a kid and you wanted to learn a super mysterious Eastern martial art, or you wanted to learn some effective self-defense skills, your karate school is where you went. And that was fueled by Hollywood hiring karate tournament fighters like Chuck Norris and Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme to star in action blockbusters, even though they couldn't act. And also too, the Karate Kid films inspired hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to take up karate. But in 1989, Jean-Claude Van Damme starred in a film called Kickboxer, which introduced the world effectively to Muay Thai kickboxing. Of course, Muay Thai had been around for ages, but it wasn't very well known. It was almost completely unknown in the West. But even 5 years after that film, in the mid-90s, Muay Thai kickboxing clubs had sprung up just about in every major town in the West. It had become immensely popular due to its super effective techniques. Power kicking, especially to the thigh, strong striking, clinching work, elbows, knees, and even takedowns. In contrast to that, karate had started to lose a lot of its sheen. From here, we were punching in the air and doing really abstract drills, and rather than demonstrating our fighting skills in a brutal, full contact, continuous competition, we were doing hyper stylized and increasingly stylized points, non-contact points fighting, which didn't, even though we were fast, and it looked very spectacular, didn't really prove that we were effective, and there were question marks over our effectiveness. And indeed, karate people who do focus on performance-based kata and point sparring often have that niggling fear, will my karate actually work? And those fears are, for the most part, well-founded. Okay, moving on. So Muay Thai exploded in popularity, and also in 1993 the UFC started as a one-off spectacle to see which martial art was the best. Of course, what it proved was that no one martial art was the best. If you wanted to compete at that high level or be a holistic martial artist in terms of self-defense, you needed to learn stand-up fighting, you needed to learn grappling and clinching and close range work, and takedowns and throws and ground fighting, and of course how to defend, all of the above. Even though the UFC didn't really get traction until the early noughties, from here soon, in the 2000s, mixed martial arts clubs had popped up absolutely everywhere. And at the same time, Matt Damon also brought out a film called The Bourne Identity, which showcased him busting out this really dirty, militaristic, combative fighting style. He took on multiple attackers, used improvised weapons, and it seemed to be much more realistic, much more real-world context than other martial arts, which even though which were essentially sports, and Matt Damon obviously used some really great dirty fighting techniques in those movies. And what he did in those films is often mistaken as Krav Maga. In fact, it was Kali and Jeet Kune Do that he trained with. But basically, before that film came out, no one knew what Krav Maga was. It's an Israeli military training tool, and a combative, not really a martial art, but no one knew what it was. But these days, 15 odd years later, there is a Krav Maga school in every major city, in most major towns. So basically, Krav Maga has absolutely exploded forwards because of that reputation of being super realistic. From here, it puts the training into a lot of context. There's a lot of pressure testing and training students with realistic scenarios. So where are we now? Where are we karate people after the explosion of those three martial arts? Well, the answer is we're still one of the world's most popular martial arts. We can still say we've got absolutely loads of students. Don't panic, everything is fine. From here, however, we kind of should be panicking, because the first question we need to ask is, who are these students? And the answer is they're just about all kids. In fact, it's an ongoing joke about karate's inability to recruit adults. Grown man walks into a karate dojo, but not to pick up his kids. Of course, we have parents who come and train with their kids. Of course, we have some kids who grow up to become adults, but they are not exactly a huge chunk of the student base and not a huge chunk of the market. Whereas those other styles, those 16 to 30-year-olds from here, they're what kickboxing clubs, Krav Maga clubs, MMA clubs are packed to the rafters full of those 16 to 30-year-olds from here. And the point I'm trying to make, and the concerning thing for us is number one is, what happens to a martial arts style that can't recruit adults? And the answer is, well, adults are the instructors. And if you can't recruit adults and therefore instructors, you're eventually going to die out. It's already happening. Look at the average age of a bunch of karate instructors. The average age is migrating definitely north of 40 or even 50. From here, we're getting older and older, and it's becoming increasingly hard to recruit younger karate instructors. When I go to, because I've trained in MMA and I've trained in Krav Maga, and when I go to those clubs, people find out to do karate. People generally say, I used to do karate as a kid, but now I do this. And the point is they recognise I used to do karate. They recognise that what they did as a kid, H patterns and punching in the air and all that kind of stuff, was pretty naff and doesn't work. And now they're super excited about what they do now because it's much more effective, much more holistic, much more realistic. From here, it's what they're actually looking for out of a martial art. That's why, even though they did karate as a kid and probably had a great experience for a child, when they came back to martial arts, they didn't go back to karate. They went to these other clubs. And so it's going to be increasingly that from here we're going to find it hard to recruit instructors from our own children from here. And yeah, as I said, the average age of instructors is aging. And what happens to a martial arts club when the instructors start retiring and classes start closing down and clubs start closing down? Well, we will very, very quickly shrivel down to a absolute ghost, a sliver of what we once were. And also too, if our stronghold is kids, do you think that MMA schools and kickboxing schools and Krav Maga schools are working diligently on trying to capture those child markets? Of course they are. They have a bit of a reputation for being a bit brutal and a bit amoral in their training methods, but they are trying to promote themselves as more professional and trying to develop up junior training programs to capture that market. And as more people perceive from here those arts to be more effective and more realistic, we're going to get less and less children, and they're going to chunk away even our stronghold. So it's not going to happen in 5 years' time. It's probably not going to happen in 10 years' time, but in 20 or 30 years' time, karate could be an absolute ghost of what it once was. Now, I would like to make sure that that doesn't happen. So what can we learn from these other three martial arts? Well, the answer is from here is there is an ongoing trend for more effectiveness, more holistic training methods, not just stand-up fighting at a long distance and not just points fighting, and obviously realistic, context-based and more self-defense skills. So the big irony is that if I now ask you, because obviously we've lost all of our adults in the face of that trend, if I ask you what do karate katas teach you, or what do the bunkais in the karate katas contain? And the answer is, it's not all straight punches and flary round kicks for points fighting. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Sure, there are some straight punches in kata, but from here there aren't any round kicks, or very, very few round kicks, and certainly no flary hook kicks and stuff like that. What's in the karate kata is, from here, is hook punches, uppercuts, elbows, knees, clinches, grapples, takedowns, locks, joint trapping, from here, throws, and even arguably rudimentary ground fighting, as well as loads of dirty fighting techniques like headbutts and small digit manipulation, neck manipulation, gouging, groin kicks, oblique kicks, all sorts of dirty, realistic self-defense techniques. So the point I'm trying to make is the katas are our original record of what karate used to be. It's a collection of some of the most brutal fighting techniques ever, and certainly some of the most brutal and effective self-defense techniques at the time. Sure, there are more modern techniques now, but from here they were once cutting edge, and what the old masters wanted to pass down to us karate students. It was so important they recorded it in kata for us to remember. But the way we fight in points fighting is completely and utterly different to that. Now, if I go through that list again and I say, as well as punches and kicks, hooks, uppercuts, knees, elbows, oblique kicks, clinching, grappling, joint locks, takedowns, chokes, throws, and potentially even rudimentary ground fighting, what does that sound like? Well, all of those things sound like, they sound like MMA. And if I add to that dirty fighting, headbutts, gouging, small digit manipulation, neck manipulation, groin kicks, what does that sound like? Well, that sounds to me a lot like Krav Maga. So this is the big irony, is that the martial arts that are now chunking away our adults, and from here indeed are threatening to chunk away all of our market, and completely, not completely, but threaten to erode us down to the small sliver of what we once were, are doing what we want. They're doing, and they're experts at what the old masters wanted karate to be. They're doing what we once were. So somehow in the past 120 odd years or so, from here karate has become increasingly narrow and increasingly stylized, and we developed into this kata for performance, and we developed into a points fighting, hyper stylized fighting art, from here, if you want to even really call it that. But what we once were warriors. So in order to save karate, from here, should we continue on this trend of going against the grain and teaching kata for performance, and teaching those abstract drills without relation to the self-defense that it was once meant to pass on? And should we continue to focus our students on points fighting, and from here throwing straight punches only and sparring only at a distance in that hyper stylized, unrealistic way, when other schools are teaching much, much more effective self-defense and fighting methods? And of course the answer is we should go back to what we once were. In order to compete with our competitors, in order to beat them, from here we need to become what we used to be. We are the originals of those styles. From here, we're not a copy. From here, we're not trying to change ourselves into something we aren't. We need to return to our old ways. And of course, karate still has a massive competitive advantage over those guys as well. Karate breaks down techniques into their constituent parts, which makes it easy even for kids to learn and understand body mechanics, something that is very, very hard for kids to learn in other arts. We also have that air of Eastern mystery to a degree, although from here that a lot of that has been debunked lately, but it's still sometimes a bit of an interesting history for some people. And also too, we've got that reputation for passing on great Eastern values. So we have a really big competitive advantage if we can also prove we compete as an effective martial art, as a holistic martial art, and as a realistic martial art, and we take karate in that direction. So if we want to save karate, it is about returning to our roots. It is about returning to what our old masters wanted us to learn from the kata, our oldest record of what karate really should be like. So if you want to save karate, from here, you need to start steering your karate journey and start steering, if you're a teacher, steering your students towards that trend of effective, realistic, and holistic. Now, if you think, I'm just going to quickly add one last little thing. If you think, well, all of these, one-step sparring drills and points fighting, if you think that they're traditional and you're preserving traditional skills, then guess what? If you really study the history of karate, you'll see that they're generally modern affectations, which mostly developed in the past 60, 70, 80 years or so. From here, certainly just about all of them were developed in the past 120 years. So you're really preserving modern karate, not actual traditional karate. And from here, if you're also thinking from here, I want to develop my students' sense of personal perfection, from here, rather than worrying about personal protection, well, the market is calling for personal protection, but more importantly from here, one is not exclusive to the other. You can still teach a sense of self-mastery and teach your students how to protect themselves. And in fact, you'll be building their confidence in a much stronger way than just learning abstract drills. You'll actually be teaching them confidence and strength of actually knowing what they do will work in real life. So, with that in mind, train hard, train smart, think common sense.